There are a couple of things just to keep in mind before we get started. We are recording this, so just so you know, this will be recorded and we will make this available on our YouTube channel. Everybody will be muted except for myself and Sarah. If you have anything to add, and we encourage you to jump in and share your thoughts and any questions that you have, please do so in the chat box, and we will monitor that and engage with you that way throughout. Also, we will drop some links and things as they come up in the chat box. So please make sure to check that out as well. And I have my webcam on to say hello. Sarah will present with her webcam on. The other board members will maybe jump on to say hello, but we are not requiring anybody to use their webcams if they would not like to. We want to do a couple of reminders before we get started. Membership dues are now in place. We have different membership levels. For the first year that we are collecting membership dues, everybody will be at the same level. And that is to kind of recognize the people who've been with us from the beginning and keep things as affordable as possible this first year to get a feel for where we really need to be, but also, most importantly, just to say thank you for all that you've done to support us as we have begun to get started. You can see here all of the benefits of being members. We will also be adding some more benefits, but this is a breakdown of, according to the bylaws, what you will receive as of right now. We also want to remind you that we have merch. So you may not be able to see this because of my background, but I have one of the coffee mugs. There are t-shirts, there are water bottles, there are stickers. Like I said, the stickers, I had mine earlier, one of mine earlier. Here it is. This is the small size sticker. It's what's on the back of my car now, one of them. And so those are available. This is small size if you're wondering what the sizes are. And all of that's available at a discount until the end of summer series, which is today. So make sure if you want to jump on that 10% discount, you get that soon. And the link to our Redbubble store should be in the chat because people are on top of things and usually pop those in there. All right, so let's get into the our presentation. So Sarah is presenting for us today. She is our secretary. She's the AIDN secretary. She is also the curriculum design strategist for the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. She is a doctoral student in the instructional leadership program with a concentration in instructional technology at the University of Alabama. And she received her master's degree in instructional design from Stanford. Her research interests include innovative educational programming for professional adults, and that includes microlearning, educational technology and apps, and innovative learning strategies for enduring learning among professional adults and patient education. She's been in Birmingham since fall 2016, and if you were here in our Get to Know You meeting, we learned that her background is in Indian cooking, her fusion cooking, if you remember that conversation. I thought about that the other day when I completely made something up in the kitchen that I was doing fusion. So moving to Birmingham, Alabama has sparked her interest in travel, hiking, and exploring local destinations, and of course, food. So with that, I'm going to welcome Sarah, and I'm going to stop sharing so that she can share her presentation and get us started.
Thank you. Thank you, Courtney. I wasn't able to unmute myself. Let me begin with sharing my screen. So thank you, Courtney, for the introduction. Yes, fusion cooking is my current forte, especially because I don't specialize in, or I'm not even near as close as being a beginner in Indian style of cooking. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this session. Thank you, Aiden, for giving this opportunity and a platform to present. My presentation will be slightly unconventional or different from the ones presented during the summer series, in the sense that I bring in a non-higher ed or non-industry perspective. The perspective is that of an association, a medical society to be specific, not-for-profit organization. Here, learners are often placed in a non-competitive learning setting without a tangible target, such as assessments, mandatory requirements, credits to meet, or targets to claim. So during this presentation, I will be throwing out a few uncommon terms or terms very specific to my process or to the organization. And I'm going to define those here. And I'll also give you recommendations of what you could replace them in a more broad setting. So ASRM, it stands for the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. REI, which is reproductive endocrinology and infertility, is a medical subspecialty, and I'll talk about that a little more in detail. I often throw out the terms, and I, sometimes have to correct myself or at least rephrase. I throw out professional adults, clinicians, physicians, surgeons, fellows, or trainees. You could just scratch that and replace it with adult learners. I will be talking about question-based or spaced learning, testing effect, retrieval practice, replace that with adaptive testing or learning. I will be using the term documents often, and they stand for guidelines, practice opinions, or ethics committee opinions. And we can replace that with the term published materials. So moving on to from that introduction. All right, so during, I will switch between the backward design framework, which is the learning, and then also to the background. I'm going to start with defining backward design. So we're, through that process, and then I'm going to switch back and forth between the background that I present of my learners and the framework. So the definition of backward design and the 3 steps in the process, I used the book by Bowen, Understanding by Design. And I've dropped that reference below. But I used it as a development guide when incorporating backward design, because the book describes the framework for designing courses using backward design. So that the approach is to, the typical approach that instructors or educators take to course design is a forward design, where you consider the learning activities. How do you want to teach the content? How do you develop assessments around the learning activities? Then we segue into what are our learning goals. But in contrast, backward design approach is where the goals are already set at the very beginning. And these learning goals sort of embody the knowledge, the skills that we want our learners to learn when they leave the course or leave that experience. So once that's established, the next stage is to consider assessments. And these could be standard assessments, they could be free-form assessments, or any other kind of assessment to the learning. And the backward design framework also suggests that educators consider the overarching learning goals and how students can be assessed prior to even getting down to building the foundations or teaching the content. So from there, I'm going to, those are the 3 stages that we have incorporated in various projects, because a lot of times it doesn't go ground up, it comes from the sky and the pie in the sky to what we can accomplish or how we could deliver this learning experience. Obviously, I'm dabbling between 2 computers or 2 slides with the recent format, but moving on. So yes, the society is committed to facilitating educational activities for continuing medical education or enduring learning materials, and to the lay public, because we have two specific websites. There's that patient-facing website, and then there is the membership-facing website. And so it's obviously a membership-based medical society. Members come to the society for various reasons, but the top three are: one, journals. There's the Fertility and Sterility, which is an international journal. There are sister journals, about 3 of them, which are open access. And then there's a fourth one, which is the Journal for Assisted Reproduction. The second reason members are drawn to the society is for the annual scientific congress. Obviously, as a member, you gain exclusive access to some of the courses, the programming, to be able to participate in the programming and to attend on discounted prices as an attendee. The third top reason is networking, membership, access to the membership directory, and obviously leadership within that space. There's the news, which is press releases and bulletins, and a small percentage or a section of the membership come for certificate courses to gain continuing medical education or continuing education credits. There's a subset of interest in podcasts, webinars, and other derivatives of the journal or the published materials. Now, that being said, one may wonder how we can accomplish and develop ongoing learning, and I'd like to lean on sort of the values that ASRM established. And as part of the strategic plan, I want to lean on the first of the 7 values, which is learning, to include lifelong education, scholarship, and open sharing of information and knowledge. All right, so for this presentation, with that background sort of set, I want to segue into the first stage in the backward design. And specifically for the purpose of this presentation, I'm picking out one of the many projects that we have used this framework. The starting point, again, of many of the learning projects was to conduct a survey on ASRM's online learning or online courses that were offered. We received over 1,500 responses. The results were analyzed and categorized into, I would say, 2 primary sections or categories: engagement and content. I joined ASRM, I would say, a couple of years after the survey went out. I was also, I would say, about in the beta testing of stage 2 in the backward design. But when I looked at the survey, I realized that we could have definitely included another category and moved some of the pieces from engagement and content into technology. So some of the highlights from engagement and content. Under engagement, members wanted an increase in engagement. Obviously, they wanted shorter presentations because some of our courses have over 40 slides within a module, and then there are about 16 modules or 28 modules to accomplish. Members also wanted, it says, more interaction, live sessions, and I'm guessing this is to do with the maybe discussion forums, but we also took into account that these live sessions could be expert encounters, more Q&A time. This could be, again, webinars or expert encounters that sort of existed in the grand rounds, or these are, modern day webinars. They also wanted more chat rooms or blogs on different topics, and I'm kind of categorizing that under, again, networking and mentorship. Under content, there's a long list, but I wanted to just highlight just the 3, which is some of the courses had a post and a pre-assessment, and so they didn't want the use of the same pre and post assessment, which is repetition of the same questions. They wanted instantaneous responses or feedback to some of the questions that were, or assessments that were taken. And The survey also showed that they wanted multiple levels of learning from basic to advanced, almost like self-directed learning that most adult learners want to have control over. A few others that were highlighted that I haven't included in this list, but sort of can fall into the top 3 categories, which is add more online courses, add sort of like animation or some sort of like motion instead of static monochromatic one-dimensional images. They also ask for more videos in the learning modules and sort of shorter learning opportunities. So from this survey and needs, the results were drilled down to 3 areas, which are first, increase utilization of ASRM's documents. This is where you want to replace that scientific published materials. They wanted more chunked and scaffolded learning to increase retention, which means even though there wasn't a requirement for a tangible assessment, there was a need for an accomplishment in the learning that they took on. And then also the results showed that there was a need to utilize evidence-based educational strategies. So here I want to highlight another area, which is the reproductive endocrinology and infertility subspecialty, or REI, began or in time developed into sort of like a lab baby factory expansion. And so over time, the outlook changed from being just IVF strong to more in the field of research. And so this required their upcoming trainees or the current physicians, practitioners to require a strong foundation in clinical science. But there was also a bigger need in foundational training and skills to make complex decisions, to answer the right questions, and to give the best care that is needed. So there was a need for an evidence-based and innovative educational strategy that combines technology, pedagogy, and content expertise to better prepare the next generation of fellows or practitioners that were coming along. Okay, so moving to the second stage, which is determining acceptable evidence, which involved designing assessments. An article that I picked out shows that, or a study shows that really highly motivated learners, or most often medical students, tend to forget roughly 25 to 30% of basic science knowledge after year 1. By year 2, medical students tend to forget 50 to 80% or more. And then in the background, there are the digital natives, a generation of physicians who prefer videos on demand over waiting, for the next series to drop. They prefer a 2-minute cooking video over picking up a recipe, and then prefer to swipe through Instagram rather than maintain a photo album. And so it's a different generation that we're preparing towards, and we had to keep that in mind as we progressed into these innovative learning strategies. So we had to develop an assessment or an environment of assessment that was a no pressure environment. From the results, which is engagement, content, and technology, we extrapolated a section for engagement involved question-based learning. Content, case-based or problem-based learning, and technology, which is focusing on mobile learning. And so the product that I want to present is called the QBoost project, which is mobile learning with space learning and question-based learning. I know it's learning repetitive, but that was our goal. And so the third stage was planning the learning experience and the instructional materials to use. And this is the part where I'd like to introduce the small learning. So we began, again, we went back to the drawing board and had a task force or a focus group that identified the following. They said we needed a task force, identify topics that covered from basic to advanced. We wanted to ensure that the question writers were trained to write I wouldn't call it fun questions, but learning questions, not assessment questions. We included a validation process. Where's the content coming from? How is that content validated before developing the questions? After these questions are developed, how are we going to vet them before we publish them? We did a soft launch, about 5 pilots or beta tests among multiple career levels. We hit the board members, got their approval, moved on to the next stage of identifying just rank and file members of the society, moved on to the trainee group or the fellowship group of users, moved on to the general attendees from the conference or general membership. What we also did with content is we staged it. We first developed question banks specific to the REI field, which is a major component of our membership, which are the physicians, the practitioners. Then we are in the process of developing these similar question banks for trainees who are residents, upcoming OBGYNs interested in a career in REI, who are willing to, are almost in the process of segueing into the REI fellowship. And the third set we're addressing are the multidisciplinary. We're developing question banks for the nursing professionals. Our source content are all ASRM content, which are guidelines, opinions, and courses. When I say guidelines, these are documents that define the course of the REI practice. They're written by the physicians for their future or for their current use and future. Opinions could be practice opinions or ethics opinions. We tried to develop case-based questions that includes diversity. We use soft skills in most of the questions, where the vignettes included communication and counseling, multi-ethnic naming, where everybody's not Tom and Jane, but there are names that sound inclusive, and characters that sort of bring in a sense of humor, where this lady's trying to get pregnant, she's exercising 2 hours or 5 hours a week, and her husband's just enjoying watching TV most of the time. Help me, how do I find a solution? Sort of a humor and vignettes around these case-based scenarios. In terms of technology, we adopted a web application and an app. We incorporated emails and push notifications. There's space learning and micro learning. So in this backward design, from the big pie in the sky, we were able to bring it down to a micro learning format, where a user would register and enroll in one question bank. And each of these question banks, which go through that entire vetting process, has about 8 to 10 questions, very specific to a document or a course or a guideline. Once the user registers, either at that exact moment or on the day they sign up to receive that first set of questions, they begin to receive 2 questions every other day. So if it's 10 questions in a span of about 5 to 6 days, they would have seen all those questions. And then based on adaptive programming, they would be the questions would be pushed back with 3 repetitions for every incorrectly answered question and 2 for every correctly answered question, thereby incorporating space learning, giving them a feeling of on-the-go learning because they're not tied down to a course. There's the adaptive testing, where you're looking at the same question and you're not answering it randomly, but you're being intentional in your responses. Now, every question, multiple choice or multiple response question, usually has about 4 to 5 options with some exceptional situations, but every question includes an explanation where they read the explanation to the correct answers, or the answer key and the incorrect distractors. Now, every explanation has a link to the source document. So there's always a cyclic movement within that learning period for that specific question and for the overall question bank in itself. This project was launched in 2018. I would say we went completely officially live in 2019. Again, there are no credits to claim. It's a no pressure environment. We have about 747 participants, about 27 ongoing question banks. And if you look at the right-hand side where there's a proficiency increase, users begin at a 49% average initial and accomplish a 72 at any time, and an overall proficiency increase of 46%. I mean, my biggest or favorite number is I have currently 1,737 enrollments, out of which about 562 participants have progressed beyond that first presentation, which is that first set of questions. So this is a very engaged audience because there are about 91% of users active in the system with that in a no pressure environment. This application has the option to turn on a leaderboard, which we have not. We did pilot test it in the first, I'd say in the first pilot. We did not receive a very good response. People were not interested in the questions, but they were more interested in why their name was under somebody else's name. And so we wanted to take down any sort of competitiveness and give learners the opportunity of a no pressure environment. And so with that, I conclude my presentation. And if anybody has any questions, I can take them.
Thanks, Sarah. I had a question while we're waiting for some to come into the chat. So one of the things that I really connected with my background in higher ed and now working in a corporate environment is that beginning when you were talking about identifying, kind of doing a needs analysis and identifying what it is that the learners wanted and needed. In higher education, you know, that's similar to having that initial conversation with faculty about what it is that they want to accomplish in their courses. And I found it difficult to pull that information out of faculty. They had a hard time kind of creating their own objectives and competencies. And so it became a task of learning how to have that conversation. So when you are trying to determine what those competencies or objectives or outcomes are going to be, how do you approach that in determining what those should look like?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So because this society is membership based, what we aim to develop, what we then develop and then ultimately consume are all by the members. And so if we write out 5 needs or identify 5 gaps, the gaps and the needs are provided by the users. And so they identify those needs and we build strategies to be able to accomplish those or fill those gaps. And so when I say we, it is including the members of the society. When I have a task force, it is the members of the society that are a part of the task force. We develop the content, members of the society develop this content. When we run it through the vetting process, it is again members of the society that are vetting, experts in the field that are vetting this. And then ultimately when we launch the product, it's again these members that go back as learners to utilize that product. And so it's a very engaged set of learners who become faculty at one point, and then they play the role of a reviewer and then play the role of a learner. And so it's very cyclic. They're the, you know, the starting and the ending users of the product.
So do you guys help in some way help them with formatting those competencies so that they're measurable? Do you provide any of that kind of guidance?
Yes, we have a CME manager, a continuing medical education manager, that aligns these needs and competencies to the ACCME, which stands for the American Academy for Continuing Medical Education. And so we align them to that. The point I wanted to bring out is that, which just ran out of my head in a second, was that this engaged audience I'm talking about, we sort of provide them the backbone in terms of the pedagogy or the content, not the content expertise, but in terms of how to provide this learning, how to design the needs assessment, and sort of like the skeletal pieces to the meat that goes in.
I think as you're talking, this sounds like this would be a great kind of model for Aiden and us deciding, what content we provide and how we provide that content. So I actually think that we should, in our planning meeting next week, talk about how we can implement something like that so that we're serving our members and making sure that they're getting exposure to the topics how they want and in the mode they want. So we may be maybe pulling on those skills a little bit there, Sarah.
Absolutely.
There was something else. So I'm curious if people want to drop in the chat how they think students would respond to being ones who were asked to develop the competencies for a class or ask for input. If instructors ask for their input on content, outcomes, objectives, and I'm curious as to how faculty would handle that. Does anybody who's here have experience in doing that or trying that or have predictions of how that may go? Part of me thinks of some of the more difficult clients that I worked with as in faculty and think their heads might explode. But I did have heard that there are some faculty or some kind of educational theories that are pushing faculty to allow students to be more involved in determining the content and how things go. So I'm curious what the experience level is with that and how that would work in higher education. Yeah, Tish brings up personalized learning is what it's called. Yeah. And it's I think an interesting concept. I think it requires a lot of, for you, Sarah, being part of something that's membership based is one thing, but there's a certain element of control that I think that you have to let go of to allow that personalized learning to happen. You have experienced that where you look at some things and had kind of wished that things went one way when they didn't, when members wanted it to go another way?
Yes. A lot of times we have, we call it the hobby horse. And so we have to wrangle people back to, I think that's the big role that we play as the association management, where we bring people back in and say, hey, y'all decided on these 5 learning needs. So we're going to stick to them. We're not going heavily on one route. And a lot of times, because this is multidisciplinary, we may have the mental health professionals who are also part of the society that provide counseling and support to families going through IVF or pregnancy loss. And so they want to ride into the horizon very specific to mental health. And that's when we bring them back and say, if we want to talk about how to communicate to your patient, we also want to talk about how to provide care. And so we bring in that multifaceted learning environment where anybody that walks into one of these presentations can take away counseling, could take away science, could take away content. So that, I think, is the big role that we play.
So Rayanne says when she did corporate, they built roadmaps for training so learners could self-direct and choose a path and end goal they wanted to achieve. And those were hosted on a SharePoint intranet outside of the LMS. That's interesting because the corporation that I work for, now we're trying to map that out and figure that out. And that's one thing I'm trying to get them to consider is those kind of self-directed paths. And so it's interesting that that's held outside your LMS because the LMS that they have, y'all in higher ed, you don't know how good you have it with these LMSs because
I agree.
The ones on the corporate side, they're just, well, it's rough. So yeah, having to pull a lot of that stuff out of the internet, out of the LMS, and into other resources is necessary. Are there any other questions or comments that anybody has about backwards design in general or anything related? Sorry, I'm looking at chat on this monitor and my camera is in front of me, so I apologize for looking like I'm not looking at you. But I was just looking for conversations. So while we're waiting for those to come in, I am going to go ahead and reshare my screen to talk about ways that you can continue to connect with us. So for those of you who are new, going back to this thing that Sarah and I were talking about kind of doing a needs analysis and seeing what it is that we can do. We hope that as a young organization, we really are trying to do things that can be most helpful and beneficial for our members. So if you are not a member, we hope that you will join and be a member. You can be a member even if you live out of state. We welcome you and still want your input and your ideas. So our website is here. Our website has information like our bylaws. We do post our events and things like that here. Any election information will be posted here. So check us out there. We are also on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And Rayanne is posting these links in our chat so that you can go directly there. Thank you, Rayanne. We also, like I said, have a YouTube channel. We will be posting all of these presentations on our YouTube channel. Please don't forget our Redbubble store where you can get merch. The prices will go up soon, so make sure you jump on those. We are planning a fall forum, and we hope that we can do something in person. So cross your fingers for that. And if you have suggestions on where you would like to see that be, or where those places could be, please let us know. There's a question that says, is there a place to post job inquiries? Emory Law is looking for an ID and reached out to me for potential candidates. We are happy to post those on our Facebook channel. So if you want to send us a link to that job posting, we're happy to push those out on our website. So you can either drop that in the chat here before you leave, or email us. Our email is alabamaidnetwork@gmail.com. You can always email us there. Yeah, if you have things to share, or if you have any questions, then feel free to reach out there or engage on Facebook. I don't see any other questions coming in. So I'm again going to thank you for being here. I appreciate your time and your attention. And thank you again to Sarah for your presentation. And we will be in touch soon with you guys to see what Fall Forum will look like and other ideas that we will be implementing to help keep you informed and engaged. So thank you so much for your time today and throughout our sessions, and we hope you have a great weekend, and we hope those of you in higher ed have a very smooth beginning to the fall semester that's coming up. So good luck to that, and we will talk to you guys again soon.